I am going to bring out our next guest, who is the co-founder of the Solana blockchain. Please welcome Anatoly Yakovenko and your moderator, Anita Ramaswamy. Warm welcome.
Anatoly, it's great to have you on stage.
Awesome to be here.
You were joking about this is the longest time you're going to be off Twitter, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Me too. So Solana was really successful in 2021. You guys had a really fantastic year, and everyone heard about you. You're sort of this blockchain that just emerged and broke out. And 2022 has been a little bit harder, though, right? Like, you've had some outages. It's a tougher macro environment as well, and it's just been a more challenging landscape for crypto. So given that, how are you planning on sort of maintaining the relevance of Solana?
Well, I think despite the market downturn and despite a bunch of technical issues, we see user numbers still growing for certain kinds of applications, like NFTs and things like that, are still in number of mints. I think 500,000 mints a day sometimes.
But trading volumes are down.
Trading volumes are definitely down, and those, I think, depend on the macro environment. But if you look at the total number, it's still about 20 to 30 million per day, which is ridiculous, right? Like, if you kind of step back for a second and you think about what's happening, these are pictures of cats, right, that are traded $20, $30 million per day on platforms like Magic Eden and OpenSea. What's really interesting about that is that this is a core Web3 business model. It's an entire stack to make money on the web purely from digital content that does not rely on the Google Ad Exchange or the Facebook Ad Exchange to monetize, or a subscription. So this is actually, I think, a clear paradigm shift in how you can make money on the web. And it's one that's really sticky despite the market downturns, despite crazy blow-ups and hacks and whatever, like Luna or whatever. It's people are still creating, people are still forming communities and trading and stuff like that.
And what gives you confidence that that's going to continue?
So I don't know if the NFTs are going to scale to hundreds of millions of users. This is like the big unknown. Right now, when you kind of look at crypto, at its peak, we had maybe 10 million monthly active signers between all the blockchains combined. So these are folks that actually have installed Phantom or MetaMask or some kind of wallet, and on a monthly basis use one of these decentralized applications. It's a pretty small set, right? 10 million users. Right now it's probably 2.5 million. So what is it going to take for us to get to 50 million to 100 million actual users that understand key phrases and BIP39 recovery and like securing all that stuff, right?
What is it going to take?
This is the big question, and I think the way that we think about it is that it's not going to be like the AOL keywords of crypto. It's not going to be something that hides the actual elements of self-custody. It has to be something that is so good that people are willing to figure it out and learn. And when we see that, we can then actually focus on the UX and improve maybe some of the security challenges there, some of the UX challenges, and get more people to adopt. But I think the applications have to drive adoption. It's not going to be, let's hide crypto in the background somewhere and like host your wallets on Amazon, and all of a sudden everyone's a crypto user.
Yeah, so I know NFTs have been a really big part of Solana's ecosystem growth. But if you're wrong about NFTs, hypothetically, then what else do you think will drive growth in the ecosystem?
So I think, what does it mean to be wrong about NFTs? Like, right now we see those assets split out into like a bunch of different verticals. Some are building brands like Hello Kitty. Some are trying to build IP and lore, like the next Marvel or whatever. Some are building games around them. Some are building social networks. So all of these things that you imagine, in the post-crypto adoption world, when we have 1 billion users with self-custody, all those things will exist, right? But the stepping stone there right now is for a startup is potentially make an NFT set, then figure out how to build elements around it that create these social network effects or gaming or whatever.
So I know you're excited about NFTs, but I know there's also something else that you've talked about being excited about, which is the Solana phone. You guys are launching a Web3 mobile phone. Can you tell us a little more about that?
So this is kind of the I spent most of my career at Qualcomm. Like the first time I looked at crypto, I kind of just immediately thought, well, your phone has all the hardware to be a hardware wallet and an application environment for you to build amazing experiences for signing, for dealing with mixed media like NFTs or whatever. That should be your primary wallet, and it should be baked in. But neither Google or Apple really want to take that on because true digital asset ownership disrupts their business models. Like when you're the content creator and you have an app on the iOS App Store, you can take the 30% fee and you can basically eat it and give it to Apple. Magic Eden can't sell a $10,000 NFT for $13,000 on the iOS app. They can't just add that tax, nor can they eat it, because that will basically destroy their profits. So this idea of true digital ownership means that the digital items have to be treated like physical ones. And this is just not something that Apple or Google are really built around. They're built around a very rent-seeking model where all the content is really owned by the creator, and you as a user, you rent it. When you buy a video from Amazon, buy to own, you don't actually own it, right? Like everyone realizes that you don't own it.
Sure. Yeah. I guess when you announced the phone, I was thinking that it's a pretty tough business to be in, right? It's really capital intensive. It's hard to launch a mobile phone, and at the same time, there are so many companies that have tried to do it and failed in the past, like Facebook is one notable example. Why do you think Solana can get it right where others haven't?
I worked on the Facebook phone, worked on the Amazon Fire, the Windows Metro. A bunch of those failed. Main difference now is that it's actually not that capital intensive. The phone market has matured to a point where, Awesome, the OEM that we're partnering with, it's a 40-person startup. They're not a huge company. They can quickly build an amazing device and focus on design and the very small modifications to Android to enable this Web3 experience. So a lot of this stuff is done. The reason why I think the opportunity exists right now is because we don't have to go and get 10 million sales right off the bat. We can actually target a very small niche audience, which is crypto-heavy Web3 users that want a delightful experience for their self-custody. So imagine, we have the 50, 100,000 people that on a daily basis trade on OpenSea and Magic Eden. That is a more lucrative distribution channel for developers than the big app stores with 100 million users. Because for Web3, all the money is in these very small niche groups right now.
I'm curious if you think that's going to change. Do you see that user base sort of expanding?
That's the hope, right? And we don't know what the applications are that are going to do it. This is the kind of the billion-dollar question. Like if I knew what the app was that's going to bring 50 million users, we'd be pitching it right now. I'd be promoting
Sure.
it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a chicken and egg question sometimes with developers and users in Web3, right? Do you agree that, or would you say that if developers come into the ecosystem, that's going to bring users? Which of those things do you think comes first?
Yeah, this is, you're trying to build a flywheel here, right? And I think with these crypto boom and bust cycles, when developers build new user experiences, they bring an influx of users, you have a boom market that's saturated, that new experience gets saturated. Like the idea of digital gold, I think, is pretty saturated. I think potentially NFTs might be saturated as well. Then something else has to be built. And in the next 18, 24 months, the more startups that get into crypto and try and figure that out will drive the next cycle. Like you saw, I think, with DeFi Summer last time.
So I know you haven't publicly announced how much the phone is going to cost, but rumors are kind of swirling, and they're saying that it's going to cost around $1,000. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
Gotcha. And do you think that people have that kind of money and are willing to pay that for the phone? And
It's by hardware specs, it is, I'd say, $300 cheaper than it should be when you're comparing it to the latest Samsung or Apple device. So it is very cost effective for people that want a premium phone. We don't know yet, but our goal isn't to sell 10 million units. I think we would be very happy with 25, 50,000 units in the next year. That would be awesome.
is this something you're trying to use as a tool to attract developers?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a developer play, right? If we have a Web3 distribution channel for mobile devs, that really gives them freedom to explore and build awesome experiences that, when you're signing a transaction, you're not switching between 4 applications or copying and pasting links. It's literally like Apple Pay, right? I think users would be delighted by that, and developers are going to build awesome applications. And those are the flywheels that we need for the next cycle.
I guess one thing I wonder about is, the developers might be building things, but if the users don't come, is this sort of a moonshot from you guys, this phone, or is this like a critical and crucial part of what you're doing at Solana Labs?
This is, I would say, one of the moonshots. Like, I think, like, the reason why we can do this is because it's cheap enough to try, that it's not going to break the bank or anything like that. And the opportunity is here right now because both Google and Apple, I don't know what's going to have to change internally for them to give up on the 30% like tax on apps. It's just, it's just too good for them to give it up in the next 5 years. So while that wedge exists and crypto, let's say, actually grows from 10 million monthly actives to 100 million monthly actives in the next 5 years, I would imagine so does the SMS stack or the phone itself.
Are you worried that Google and Apple could change their mind on that?
That would be a win. Like, we basically, if we drive that decision, like, then we've won for everyone in crypto. I think that would be awesome.
So I'm curious about, you guys have been really good at attracting a lot of developers to the ecosystem. That's been a big part of, what Solana is known for. You have these hacker houses. You've built a big community. But how are you planning on maintaining that momentum and that growth and continuing to attract developers to build on Solana?
So the market for, I think, seed level teams, I think is still not like burning hot like it was 6 months ago, where I think most funding rounds were like over 100 million.
Yeah.
But they're still pretty crazy. I think teams are raising seed pre-product, basically just a couple engineers at 50 million valuations, like what 5 mil, right? Like it's just still pretty insane. So I don't know how long that's going to last, but a lot of the funds raised astronomical amounts of sums of money in the last boom market. So that's going to carry it for a while. And that's really, I think, kind of the key part for all these hacker houses and hackathons and all these events is, one of our biggest KPIs is how many devs do we see that get funding by a legitimate VC to actually go start a company.
It's a really competitive space, though, right? And when Solana first started gaining a lot of traction, everybody was calling Solana the Ethereum killer. Now there are Solana killers, different layer ones that have popped up. I mean, how are you looking at sort of differentiating yourself, especially as Ethereum has come out stronger, in my opinion, post-merge?
So if you take all the layer 2s and all the other major blockchains combined, Solana does more transactions per second than all of them combined. So that's the differentiator. Like, because of our technology, we can reduce fees to a point where the kinds of things that developers can build are just different, are not available anywhere else. And this includes things like Pyth, which does tens of millions of transactions per day, or Serum. These are much bigger applications, but those provide a base layer that folks use compose with for other applications that are built on top. So this is something that's really hard to replicate. I don't know if our technology edge is going to continue, but it's already there and it keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, I do want to talk more about competition. I feel like you have an interesting view on it as someone in crypto, and I know you're okay with competition. You played hockey, and that's kind of your thing. So I'm wondering about, just with all of these different areas that you could face competitive threats from, what are you more concerned about? Are you more concerned about the incumbents like Ethereum, or are you more concerned about upstarts? Yeah,
probably more upstarts. I think this is something like Paul Graham has always written about. Don't worry about the big companies.
Right.
They're always going to be too slow. I think it's usually an upstart with a clever idea that, this is a very hard space to optimize for, because you're really trying to fight this thing Vitalik called the trilemma, right? You're trying to build a network that's decentralized and secure and performant all at the same time, and all these things fight each other. I think an upstart is much more likely to potentially pick some point on this curve of trade-offs that might do really well in some very niche thing that's just unexpected.
Any particular ones that you're worried about?
So far, no. Like, I think, I'm honestly surprised, but we haven't seen any networks launch in the last year that have both tried to have a very large validator set that guarantees security for users and high performance at the same time. So even the layer 2s and sharding and all these other approaches, application chains, they're all around 100 to 150 validators. Basically what Tendermint did 5 years ago. So when you're in that box, I think you are somewhat constraining yourself to the amount of value you can hold or how much you can grow in the decentralization angle.
I guess speaking about the trilemma and the different trade-offs that you have, in building a blockchain, like you in the past year have experienced some major network outages, and those have been pretty high profile. What are you doing to ensure that that doesn't happen again?
Yeah, so when you're focusing on the decentralization side of it, you're trying to maximize the number of validators in the network, because what you really care about is when you have a catastrophic failure, that at least one survives. And that guarantees that no matter what happens, that the network will always continue eventually. Now, that's a kind of a very esoteric, like nerdy explanation, because when you're an application user and something isn't working, you don't really care, right? You're pissed at that moment. But
you just wanted to
want
to move on and do your transaction or whatever.
So the reliability angle is really, really hard to do when you start increasing the size of the network and you want to maintain high performance, because the data load, the rate, the amount of data, the amount of forks that you're dealing with just also increases. And like, it's called the quadratic message problem in consensus. It's just the bigger the network gets, the more data it has to handle, and then when something goes wrong, Solana prefers safety over liveness, and it means that the nodes just say, hey, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to stall. And in that event, that's when we recover. So those kinds of bugs suck. There's a bunch of work happening between our validators and the community and our internal engineering to track all of them down. But the biggest thing that is happening in this Solana ecosystem is that a whole nother team that's building a second client from scratch. So the probability of the same bug existing in both is virtually zero. And that improves both safety and reliability.
Got it. So it sounds like you're putting a lot of resources and a lot of effort into securing the network at this point.
But like the key thing that folks need to understand is that Solana is decentralized to a level that these stalls don't never impact safety. They never impact loss of funds. There's never been a single confirmed block that's been rolled back.
Do you think that at the end of the day, I mean, you have this vision for crypto going mobile and for apps to sort of be the way that Web3 grows. Do you think that users of those apps really care about decentralization? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think collectors of NFTs care that they own NFTs. I don't know how deep you go in an NFT crypto Twitter, but people really passionately care about the fact that they own them and that they have
deeper than I'd like sometimes.
Yeah, that they have true digital ownership of these things. And this is, I think, a very natural thing. Like as a human, like when you own stuff, you really don't want somebody to take it away. And once you experience that, I don't think you'd want to go back to the Web 2 model where you're kind of always renting from, our feudal overlords.
Sure. I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit more about developers, because this to me is something that really has differentiated Solana in terms of growth so far. But when I think about this problem, there's also a pool of people who's been largely left out of that whole conversation. The stats are pretty bad in tech for women specifically is what I'm talking about. But in crypto, they're even worse. I think it's like around 8% of Web3 employees overall are women, and probably even fewer who are actually engineers. And I know we were chatting about this earlier, and I had asked for how many women you have on the Solana Labs team, and I know you had declined to share that information. But what can you tell me about what you're doing to bring more women into the ecosystem?
Yeah, it sucks. I would even say that it's a worse problem in the United States than in Asia, and like recruiting talented folks is really, really hard. And in crypto, it's even harder because I think it's all a bunch of dudes. Like that just sucks. I think this is a really tough challenge for startups to handle. The way we've been trying to do this is like just pay more. Like that's kind of, you got to suck it up and like pay more for hires. But it's really, really hard to.
Do you think that will help bring more women into the ecosystem?
The folks that are picking crypto are picking a very risky career choice. And this is something that I think is an internal decision that folks need to make. And it's often harder when you're struggling with a career at all, like in tech particularly. And that's usually like a harder decision for anyone that doesn't have like an easy fallback. So I don't know. Like, I would be happy, like, you know, if I had a solution, I would definitely be executing on it. But this is like, I think, one of the hardest problems in the US for tech specifically.
Are you concerned at all that if, you know, there are groups of people who are left out of the conversation in terms of development, that maybe that's going to affect demand or the ability for Web3 to grow to different groups of people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most devs will build applications with biases that serve themselves. Like they kind of, I think that's just basically kind of common sense. And I think as you've seen in adoption, it isn't targeted, you know, adoption of crypto, most people that are in crypto conferences are pretty homogenous. That's also, I think, a problem.
Right, right. But there's nothing specific at this point that you want to share that you're focused on in terms of that problem?
Yeah, no magic wand. I think it's going to be a grind. Like internally, we're trying, but it's a pretty uphill climb.
Gotcha. Yeah. You know, I want to zoom out to sort of bring this all back to the future. And you know, everyone wants a forward-looking statement, I know. But in 5 years' time, what do you think are going to be the use cases or the apps built on Solana that will be indispensable?
This is also like kind of the billion-dollar question, and I don't know. Like I have this dream that maybe, you know, when we get to a point where there's 100 million people, you know, 500 million people with self-custody, what that changes to the world is that it allows all these folks to coordinate instantly, right? To make decisions digitally on the web that are very impactful. You know, what if 100 million people all decided to go buy every coal plant in the world and shut it down? Like right now, that would be very, very hard to do because of the different jurisdictions, how you raise money, all of the stuff. You don't trust any of the folks involved that are pitching you this. But as soon as it's a DAO with a smart contract that receives funding and can execute immediately without failure, that kind of like collective action becomes, I think, a very powerful tool. Potentially scary, but I think most folks are good, and I think that can be a very powerful tool for change.
So what do you think Solana is going to be remembered for?
I'm not sure. Cheap and fast. That would be good enough.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's great chatting with you.